Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Even as the words escaped the lips of the cultivator who had spoken them, he felt more frigid chi wrap around him, making it impossible for him to move. As for all of the other cultivators outside in the main area of the Immortals Cave, including those from the Azure Dragon Society and the Celestial Sky Society, they were completely and utterly shaken. What, core formation? Heavens! The boss of the Azure Dragon Society is actually at core formation. There are only a few core formation experts in all of Sky City. Shouldn't he be in the Rainbow District? Damn it, I've never seen a core formation cultivator so bored as to forsake missions and merit points just to make a profit with business. The Foundation establishment cultivators from the Celestial Sky Society had expressions of complete shock on their faces as they began to flee. Even if they had more people on their side, they wouldn't be able to win in a fight against a core formation expert. The only thing they could think about now was escaping the area as quickly as possible. But how could Bai Xiaochun simply let them get away? A cold snort echoed out like thunder from his room, crashing into the ears of all of the Celestial Sky Society cultivators in the area. Agonized shrieks rang out as those cultivators began to tremble, and their cultivation bases destabilized. Having lost the ability to even move, they fell down out of midair to be immediately captured by the excited cultivators of the Azure Dragon Society. The fact that a mere snort could do that to such a powerful group of cultivators was dumbfounding. Of course, the Foundation establishment cultivators who had just been captured had encountered core formation experts before. But from what they could tell, Bai Xiaochun was far more terrifying than any such people that they had met. He hadn't even stepped out of his room, he had simply tossed the quasi-core cultivators out. However, that simple action had a profound effect on the Azure Dragon Society cultivators. Their boss was now even more mysterious and unfathomable than before, shocking to a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering degree. As for the people from the Celestial Sky Society, their hearts overflowed with indescribable astonishment and terror. Bai Xiaochun felt more than pleased about everything, and didn't feel at all like he was a gold core expert bullying Foundation establishment cultivators. In fact, he felt quite the opposite. I didn't go looking to cause problems for them, he thought. They came looking for trouble. Of course, he was also aware that what had just occurred could never be kept a secret. It wouldn't be long before news about him being in the core formation stage would fill all of Sky City. Well, that's fine, he thought. I was going to reveal myself soon anyway. To do it this way will make the Azure Dragon Society's expansion go even smoother. Marveling at his own command of strategy, and also at his impressive display of might, he chuckled complacently and then closed his eyes again to continue meditating. Naturally, Master God Diviner and Shu Baosai took care of everything outside. After taking all of the Celestial Sky Society cultivators into custody, they quickly began to plan what to do next. The following day, rumors began spreading through all districts of the city. Furthermore, the stories being told were so vivid and lifelike that everyone could visualize them as if they had been present. Did you hear? Last night, the Celestial Sky Society sent 10 quasi-core cultivators, dozens of people in the Great Circle of Foundation Establishment, and countless late Foundation Establishment cultivators to attack the Azure Dragon Society. However, they were totally routed. In fact, the Azure Dragon Society captured them all. How is that possible? How is it not possible? Guess what? The boss of the Azure Dragon Society is actually a core formation cultivator. It didn't take long for the rumors to fill the city, until everyone was talking about the matter. After all, core formation cultivators were somewhat of a rarity in Sky City. Normally speaking, they would be completely focused on doing missions to earn merit points, not engaging in idle activities with the organizations and gangs in the city. The 4 cities at the base of the waterfall were essentially considered to be outside of the Starry Sky Dao polarity sect, like the outer sects of most other sects. As such, everyone desired to leave them as quickly as possible. As the gossip proliferated, the Azure Dragon Society's reputation grew more and more exaggerated. At the same time, the Celestial Sky Society was shaken to its core. As for the leaders in their headquarters, they were enraged to the limit. After a few days passed, they eventually sent an emissary to the Azure Dragon Society and paid a hefty ransom of merit points to get their cultivators back. The Celestial Sky Society quieted down, and thus ended the first stage of the conflict. It wasn't that Bai Xiaochun hadn't considered completely wiping them out and being done with it. After all, the Celestial Sky Society didn't have any core formation cultivators at all. However, having been in Sky City for so long, he had come to an even deeper understanding of the background of the Celestial Sky Society. The truth was that, in terms of manpower, they didn't really count for much. He really could wipe them out single-handedly if he wanted to. However, the leadership of the organization were all servants in a diva clan. After finding that out, Bai Xiaochun abandoned any ideas of wiping them out. As things continued to ferment in the Celestial Sky Society, the Azure Dragon Society continued to expand and become more famous. Bai Xiaochun's fantasy pills continued to rise in popularity in all 5 of the city's districts. Eventually, the Azure Dragon Society reached a terrifying level of power. Their merit point reserves also continued to grow, and more cultivators sought the security that came from being part of their ranks. There were even some smaller cultivator clans and minor organizations that officially joined the Azure Dragon Society. They had tons of merit points, and a boss in the core formation stage. Because of that, it only took 1 year for them to grow from a small gang into Sky City's second-largest organization. By that point, they had long since moved their headquarters from the original Immortals Cave to the very best area in the North District. Were it not for the fact that people couldn't actually own property in Sky City, they would likely have bought all of the real estate in the area and rented it out. In addition, Bai Xiaochun wasn't busy at all anymore. He had hired a huge team of apothecaries to concoct medicine for him. Of course, he kept the pill formula a secret. In contrast, Master God Diviner and Shu Baosai were both very busy handling the affairs of the organization. Eventually, Bai Xiaochun thought about his other Dao protectors and wondered whether or not they had heard about his recent accomplishments. Song Ke is definitely out doing missions, so he probably doesn't know. But eldest brother has surely caught wind of the situation. Why hasn't he come looking for me? Even as he contemplated the matter, Chen Manyao showed up. She simply walked through the entrance of the Immortals Cave and said that she was Madame Bai, the Daoist partner of the Azure Dragon Society's boss. Considering that the boss of the Azure Dragon Society was like the sun in the noonday sky, that made Chen Manyao extremely important as well. No one was willing to offend her, and they quickly escorted her to see Bai Xiaochun. After listening to her explanation about why she'd left and then come back, Bai Xiaochun felt a bit of a headache coming on. Realizing that he couldn't send her away, he sighed and agreed to let her stay. Because she continued to claim to be Bai Xiaochun's Daoist partner, everyone in the Azure Dragon Society treated her with extreme respect. Bai Xiaochun didn't feel like dealing with the matter, so he focused on Big Fatty Zhang. Worried that he might be in some sort of danger, he passed down orders that the entire Azure Dragon Society was to be on the lookout for him. Of course, in the orders, he didn't use the nickname Big Fatty Zhang, but rather his friend's true name, Zhang Dahai. The Azure Dragon Society was a huge, powerful group, so tracking down a single person was not a very difficult task. That was especially true considering that the orders had come from the boss himself. In fact, to many cultivators, it was an opportunity to make a name for themselves in the organization, and so soon, everyone was looking for Big Fatty Zhang. It was impossible to prevent the Celestial Sky Society from hearing about the matter, and they also began a search for Big Fatty Zhang. There was nothing that could be done about the matter, and Bai Xiaochun knew that, so he also sent people to keep watch over the Celestial Sky Society. As the search went on for Big Fatty Zhang, there was a small cultivator clan in the West District whose clan chief had just recently joined the Azure Dragon Society and had quickly risen to the rank of sub-boss. He had just been given the notice handed down to look for Big Fatty Zhang, and as soon as he saw the picture of the subject of the search, beads of sweat popped out on his forehead. For some reason, the person the boss was looking for looked very much like a spirit enhancer who had accidentally destroyed one of his magical items about 6 months before in a failed spirit enhancement attempt. That young spirit enhancer had claimed to be surnamed Zhang. In his fury, this sub-boss had imprisoned the spirit enhancer and forced him to perform spirit enhancements day and night to make up for the loss. Something like that didn't involve killing, so the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect didn't care about it. Eventually, the sub-boss had forgotten about the lone spirit enhancer, but now that he suddenly came to mind, the man started trembling. He thought back to when he'd apprehended the spirit enhancer, and remembered thinking that as long as the young man didn't die, he could use him to perform spirit enhancements in the future. Regret and nervousness gripped him as he realized that it was possible the young man very well could have died since then. Without any hesitation, he began to rush toward the clan's spirit enhancement workstation. Even from a distance, he could make out the gaunt and shriveled Big Fatty Zhang, his eyes listless as he weakly held a flying sword out in front of him. Off to the side, one of the clan servants was berating him loudly. "Hurry it up, If you destroy another flying sword, then I'm gonna. Before the servant could finish speaking, he saw the clan chief rushing over, and immediately put on a fawning expression. Just when he was going to clasp hands in greeting, the clan chief slapped him across the side of the face, sending him spinning through the air with a squawk to land about 30 meters away. Damn it, I can't believe you were being so rude to my honored guest. When Big Fatty Zhang saw this happen, he shivered and looked over nervously at the clan chief. However, the clan chief was even more nervous than him. Hurriedly helping Big Fatty Zhang to his feet, he cautiously asked, "Are you fellow Daoist Zhang Dahai?" In Big Fatty Zhang's mind, this clan chief was a completely domineering figure, and he had never before seen him act this way or speak with such courtesy. In this part of the city, he was the kind of person who could bring a torrent of trouble to anyone who bothered him. Not only was he an orange-robed disciple, he was also the chief of an entire cultivator clan. Supposedly, this clan had once produced a cultivator who went all the way to the nascent soul stage, and although he had long since perished, he had left an impression on the cultivators in this part of the city that continued on down to this day. Big Fatty Zhang had started out very confident in being able to make a living with his spirit enhancement abilities, but after a string of failures, including one very important magical item belonging to this clan chief, he had ended up being imprisoned in their clan headquarters. Half a year had gone by, and Big Fatty Zhang felt like he was descending into insanity. He didn't do anything other than perform spirit enhancements, and never got enough food to make him full. Were it not for his intense determination to keep living, he probably would have long since died from hunger and exhaustion. He was instinctively afraid of the clan chief already, but to hear the man speak his own name left Big Fatty Zhang trembling even harder than before. However, deep in his heart, he also felt anger, and that seeped into his eyes. If looks could kill, then the way he was staring at this clan chief right now would cause the man to explode violently. Fellow Daoist, please, just tell me. Are you Zhang Dahai? The clan chief's anxiety was mounting, and he didn't dare to even think about simply killing the young spirit enhancer to silence him. The Azure Dragon Society was too big and powerful, and the matter would definitely be found out eventually. If the boss found out he'd imprisoned Zhang Dahai, only to kill him later, the entire clan would be doomed. Yeah, that's right, Big Fatty Zhang yelled. I'm Zhang Dahai. The clan chief felt like his head was about to explode. He started shaking physically, and his pupils constricted into tiny dots. To see him reacting this way gave Big Fatty Zhang a very bad feeling. Suddenly feeling weak at the knees, he cursed inwardly and was just about to say something more when the clan chief unexpectedly spun to face the clan servant he had just knocked to the side. You dumbass servant, he shouted. Don't you remember how I told you this young man was an honored guest? You're supposed to respect guests. You were instructed to take care of him, but instead, you used him to screw me over. With that, he raised his hand and slapped the servant again, sending him spinning off to the side once more. Blood sprayed out of the servant's mouth, along with a bitter scream. Completely bewildered by why his master would suddenly act this way, he was just about to beg for mercy when the clan chief yelled, "Men, get this servant out of my sight. Cripple his cultivation base and throw him into the dungeon." With that, the clan chief hurried over and helped Big Fatty Zhang to his feet. Smiling at him amiably, he tried to sound as apologetic as possible as he said, "Brother Zhang, all of this was a big mistake. If you want me to execute that servant, just say the word. You must have had it so difficult these days, Brother Zhang." Patting the dust off of the dumbfounded Big Fatty Zhang's shoulders, the clan chief supported him by the arm as he led the way to the clan's main hall. Raising his voice, he called out, "Prepare the best spirit food and the finest liquor as my apology to Brother Zhang." Within moments, the entire clan was buzzing with activity. Although everyone was scratching their heads in confusion, none of them dared to question what was happening. An entire table of spirit food was prepared, and the clan chief himself waited upon Big Fatty Zhang. He even called over some female clan members to sit next to him. Big Fatty Zhang was more taken aback than ever at this sudden change of events. Never had the clan chief acted so politely, and he couldn't fathom why he would be acting like this. However, after seeing all the spirit food on the table, he put the matter out of mind and immediately began wolfing it down. The clan chief stood off to one side, trembling inwardly, but keeping a smile plastered on his face as he continuously served new dishes. Furthermore, the beautiful female clan members continued to give Big Fatty Zhang meaningful glances. Although they were somewhat confused about why they had been told to do this, they didn't hold back, and one of them even began to gently massage his neck. The others kept his drinking glass full, and even chatted with him in subdued tones. Although Big Fatty Zhang was feeling very nervous about what was going on, he simply gritted his teeth, threw caution to the wind, and enjoyed what was happening. 2 hours later, Big Fatty Zhang had eaten and drunk to his heart's content. Finally, he slapped the table and looked over at the clan chief with a glare. Alright, just what is going on here? The clan chief couldn't keep the bitterness out of his voice as he replied, Brother Zhang, what happened before really was a big mistake on my part. Please, don't take it to heart. Clasping his hands, he eyed the female clan members, then gritted his teeth and continued, Brother Zhang, if you don't despise them too much, why not just take these daughters of the clan as your own? The young women gasped and opened their mouths to protest, but the clan chief's fierce glare kept them silent. Big Fatty Zhang was scared speechless, and more nervous than ever. He simply couldn't decide what to do. After a moment passed, he asked, why are you doing this? Considering how Big Fatty Zhang was pressing the issue, the clan chief didn't dare to try to pull the wool over his eyes. Taking a deep breath, he said, Brother Zhang, the boss of the Azure Dragon Society is scouring the city looking for you. Azure Dragon Society? Big Fatty Zhang said, looking confused. He had been imprisoned back when the Azure Dragon Society was first starting to rise to prominence. Back then, there had been plenty of people who had never even heard of them, including Big Fatty Zhang. Considering the expression on Big Fatty Zhang's face, the clan chief quickly explained how, during the past few months, the Azure Dragon Society had risen to the heights of glory. Big Fatty Zhang was now shaking harder than ever. Somebody important like that is looking for me? He grabbed a big flagon of alcohol and took a long drink. Before long, evening was falling. Peppering Big Fatty Zhang with non-stop apologies, the clan chief led him out and toward the North District to finally meet the illustrious boss Azure Dragon. Along the way, Big Fatty Zhang heard a lot of people on the street talking about the Azure Dragon Society, and his nervousness grew. Soon, the moon hung high overhead, and the two of them were in the North District, right outside of a sprawling immortals cave. It had 18 enormous stone golems standing guard outside, along with countless cultivators. Inside, it was just barely possible to see rank upon rank of powerful cultivators patrolling about. Glittering spell formations surrounded the immortals cave, and high in the sky above it was a magical projection of an azure dragon. It was extremely realistic, and a mere glance at it would be enough to fill anyone's heart with shock. This is the Azure Dragon Society? Big Fatty Zhang asked hesitantly. The clan chief nodded. Of course, this wasn't the clan chief's first time coming here, but he was still extremely nervous. Big Fatty Zhang was already having trouble breathing, and truly could not fathom why an important person like the boss of the Azure Dragon Society would possibly be looking for him. However, he had no choice but to follow the clan chief as he cautiously headed toward the main gate and reported in. Before he could even finish making an explanation, 3 beams of light shot out from inside the Azure Dragon Society. The person in the lead had a long orange robe on, and wore a beautiful headdress embroidered with an azure dragon. It was none other than Bai Xiaochun. He was festooned with various defensive jade jewelry, and glittered with dazzling magical treasures. He even had a halo hovering above his head, and couldn't have looked more impressive. Flanking him were Shu Baosai and Master God Diviner. By this point, Shu Baosai looked very different than he had when he'd first been reunited with Bai Xiaochun. His face had a healthy glow, and he was also covered with all sorts of glittering treasures. He looked like the picture of riches and honor. As soon as Bai Xiaochun appeared, the Azure Dragon Society was thrown into a hubbub. Cultivators and maidservants poured out from inside the Immortals cave, and the cultivators who were already outside trembled and dropped to their knees to kowtow. Greetings, boss. Greetings, boss. Their cries created a rumbling like that of thunder. At that point, Big Fatty Zhang realized to his shock that the clan chief next to him had also dropped to his knees and was kowtowing. Big Fatty Zhang was the only one left standing, his eyes wide as he stared in shock at Master God Diviner, Shu Baosai, and Bai Xiaochun. Ninth Fatty, Big Fatty Zhang said, completely flabbergasted. Eldest brother, Bai Xiaochun cried. Laughing loudly, he stepped forward and embraced Big Fatty Zhang. Big Fatty Zhang returned the embrace heartily, looking like he had just been reunited with family. When the clan chief from the little cultivator clan saw that, his heart shook with fear that Big Fatty Zhang would try to get revenge on him, and put a look of ultimate remorse and supplication on his face. Big Fatty Zhang was so excited that he didn't even notice how the clan chief was looking at him. His laughter mingled with Bai Xiaochun's as the two of them excitedly headed toward the Immortals cave. Of the 5 Dao protectors Bai Xiaochun had brought with him, the only one unaccounted for was Song Ke. The other 4 had all returned to Bai Xiaochun's side. Even Chen Manyao was behaving herself. To Bai Xiaochun, it felt completely wonderful to have people relying on him for reasons other than his cultivation base. It was something he often thought about during his meditation sessions. Now that Big Fatty Zhang was back, Bai Xiaochun felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his heart. Big Fatty Zhang was different than Master God Diviner and Shu Baosai. Their friendship had begun on the very first day that Bai Xiaochun became a part of the cultivation world. In fact, almost as soon as Big Fatty Zhang arrived at the Azure Dragon Society, he became its second most important figure, with a standing higher than Master God Diviner and Shu Baosai. Of course, Master God Diviner and Shu Baosai took this in stride. They were well aware of how close Bai Xiaochun and Big Fatty Zhang were. As the Azure Dragon Society expanded and grew more powerful, not only did they compete with the Celestial Sky Society with their fantasy pills, but in other areas as well. However, such efforts couldn't be met with success quickly, and needed a lot of merit points to be invested. At the moment, the fantasy pills were still the bread and butter of the Azure Dragon Society. Bai Xiaochun didn't actually have a hand in such matters, he delegated the authority to Big Fatty Zhang and the others. Overall, Bai Xiaochun was completely pleased with how amazing he was. The only thing that he wasn't happy about was that he actually didn't own his own Immortals cave. Everything in Sky City was rented out by the sect. After making some inquiries, he learned that it would be easier to find a phoenix feather or a Qilin horn than to find someone in Sky City who owned their own property. The only way to get one would be to have someone very powerful backing you. Unfortunately, Bai Xiaochun didn't have any powerful backers, so he had no choice other than to abandon the idea. Instead, he focused on his cultivation, using much of his profits from the Azure Dragon Society to purchase spirit medicines and spirit food to increase the speed of his progress. It was only after spending about 1 million merit points that he finally reached the point where he had successfully cultivated the third level of the Undying Live Forever technique from the toes of his left foot all the way up to his calf. When that part of his leg pulsed with the power of his undying tendons, he could send astonishing fluctuations rolling out from it, fluctuations that could shake heaven and earth with intense power. The power in his left leg vastly surpassed that of his right leg, and was the source of the most incredibly fleshly body power he had at his disposal. After a few tests, Bai Xiaochun realized that he hadn't just experienced an increase in strength, but also speed. At the moment, his left leg could move at least twice as fast as his right. Of course, even before that, he had been one of the top figures in his cultivation level in terms of speed, thanks to his undying heavenly king body and heaven Dao gold core. Therefore, anyone who saw his speed now would be left gasping with shock. In fact, thanks to this increase in speed, Bai Xiaochun actually felt as if the other parts of his body were sluggish. One day, when I finished cultivating the undying tendons, then when I burst out with full speed. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun's eyes shone with anticipation. Back in the middle reaches, in the river-defying sect, it would have taken a very long time to reach this point, even with the help of the blood ancestor. But here at the source of the river, in the starry sky Dao polarity sect, the indescribably strong spiritual power, plus the vastly superior spirit medicines and spirit food, made everything completely different. The only catch was that acquiring those resources required merit points, and a lot of them. Thankfully, that was exactly what Bai Xiaochun had. In addition to his success with his undying tendons, the vast quantity of merit points at his disposal ensured that his frigid school will evolving incantation also advanced by leaps and bounds. The Heavenspan River water here was much different than in the lower or middle reaches. It was so much stronger and purer that the lesser versions could hardly compare. At one point, he even spent tens of thousands of merit points to buy an entire bowlful. Eventually, he reached the peak of the frigid acolyte level. With the wave of a hand, he could cause frigid coldness to fill a 300-meter area, within which would appear a single blurry frigid shadow. Bai Xiaochun could switch positions with the frigid shadow at will. If used correctly in combat, it was a trick that could help him win in an unexpected way, and perhaps even turn a defeat at the hands of a powerful opponent into a victory. Bai Xiaochun was very excited about this, and even set up a special training ground to practice in. After sealing the place so that he was completely alone, he performed some tests. Upon summoning the frigid shadow in a location inside the 300-meter frozen area, he could take a step forward and then instantly take the shadow's place. It was almost like a teleportation. After familiarizing himself with the process, he was left so excited that it was difficult to put into words. After reaching the peak of the frigid acolyte level, his techniques all improved, and his cultivation base also advanced. Because of the frigid chi buildup in his Heaven Dao gold core, His cultivation base was now at the peak of the early gold core stage. With one more step forward, he could break through into mid-gold core. Bai Xiaochun was already certain of how to head in the direction of that breakthrough. It was none other than reaching the frigid adept level. Once I reach the frigid adept level, I'll step into the mid-gold core stage. And that day isn't too far off. He threw his head back and laughed uproariously, musing that coming to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect really was the right choice. In fact, if he had known how wonderful Sky City was going to be, he would have come earlier. Even as Bai Xiaochun reveled in complacency, the hostilities between the Celestial Sky Society and the Azure Dragon Society were increasing. In fact, numerous meetings had been held in the Celestial Sky Society to try to figure out what to do about Bai Xiaochun and the Azure Dragon Society. Unfortunately, Bai Xiaochun was a core formation cultivator, something that had caught them completely unawares, and had also lost them the initiative. Their previous failed attempt to take him out had also significantly damaged their awe-inspiring reputation. Of even greater significance than that was that the sheer size of the Azure Dragon Society made any schemes and plots they hatched relatively useless. Furthermore, in terms of their ability to use force, although they had a powerful background, they didn't have even a single core formation cultivator in their organization. Although everyone talked about how they came from a clan with a diva patriarch, the truth was that the top orange-robed disciples in the Celestial Sky Society were nothing but servants in that clan. As such, their background sounded very impressive, but nobody in the clan really cared that much about them. They really had no choice other than to report the matter to some of their superiors and hope that someone would show up to help them. However, despite having made several such requests over the past months, nobody had paid them any attention. Things to do with core formation cultivators weren't very important to the clan as a whole, and definitely wouldn't mobilize the forces of the entire clan to help them. The Celestial Sky Society would have to handle the matter on their own. After waiting for quite some time without getting a response, the people in the Celestial Sky Society realized what was going on, and yet, weren't willing to just give in. We can't let things keep going on this way. That's right, that damned Azure Dragon Society rose up too quickly and violently. If we don't do something soon, we're going to be playing second fiddle to them forever, but the clan has been ignoring us. I can't believe we haven't been able to turn up any information about the background of Boss Azure Dragon. There's something fishy going on, I'm telling you. It's almost as if someone has wiped out all records of him. As the discussion played out, a shadowy figure sat off to the side, a person who seemed to be wreathed in flickering darkness. Suddenly, he spoke in a sinister voice. Since the clan is ignoring us and Boss Azure Dragon is too mysterious, then why don't just take the fantasy pills out of the picture? That would cripple the Azure Dragon Society, resolve this deadlock, and also make it more clear how to completely finish things. As for exactly how to take the fantasy pills out of the picture, it's simple. You people just never put enough thought into it. Just file a grievance with the sect regarding fantasy pills. After all, they still aren't really legal to sell. His words were met with silence, and yet, all of the Celestial Sky Society's leaders' eyes began to shine brightly. The person who had just spoken was none other than the boss of the Celestial Sky Society. After the decision was formalized, the Celestial Sky Society sprang into action. They compiled a list of all the supposed side effects and harmful aspects of the fantasy pill and reported them to the sect. Furthermore, they backed the effort with all the money and connections they had at their disposal. 3 days later, an order came down from Sky Quarter Rainbow, which was announced everywhere in Sky City. The Sky Quarter Peak Lord had ordered that disciples were forbidden from purchasing fantasy pills. And there was more. A jade slip shot through the air in a bright beam of light toward the Immortals cave that was the headquarters of the Azure Dragon Society. It pierced through all of the defensive spell formations like a hot knife through butter before coming to a stop before Bai Xiaochun. Then, scintillating light burst out from it, along with a profoundly ancient voice. Hostage Bai Xiaochun from the river-defying sect is to report immediately to the Sky Quarter Peak Lord. Bai Xiaochun had just been in the middle of performing some breathing exercises, so the sudden arrival of the jade slip caused his eyes to go wide. Shivering, he said, "The Sky Quarter Peak Lord? He wants to see me? What does he want? I don't even know him." From the tone he had detected in that voice just now, the speaker hadn't seemed very pleased. What's going on? Even as Bai Xiaochun's nervousness began to mount, Master God Diviner and Shu Baosai showed up, serious expressions on their faces. Big Fatty Zhang seemed very angry, and the other leaders all looked extremely anxious. Shu Baosai gritted his teeth and said, "Junior Patriarch, the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect just issued orders prohibiting the trafficking of fantasy pills. This is definitely the handiwork of the Celestial Sky Society. They're trying to cut off our main source of income. Xu Baosai's life had been quite comfortable lately, and he had very much enjoyed seeing merit points rolling in without stop. But now, it seemed that it all was coming to an end. How could he not get nervous? What do we do, boss? Without fantasy pills, the Azure Dragon Society is in great danger. That's right. We've been expanding too quickly recently, and the news about the restrictions on the fantasy pills is definitely going to spread like wildfire through the city. Xu Baosai wasn't the only nervous one. The other cultivators in the Azure Dragon Society were all thinking the same thing. After all, the vast majority of the Azure Dragon Society's income came from fantasy pills. Without those pills, the Azure Dragon Society's enormous size would quickly become its biggest disadvantage. After all, to maintain its current size required a significant merit point expenditure in salaries. If too much time went by, they would be forced to cut back in certain areas, and the Celestial Sky Society would definitely take advantage of that. They would go in for the kill, and try to destroy all the advances that the Azure Dragon Society had made in the past. In the final analysis, the biggest problem was that the Azure Dragon Society didn't have any resources built up. Compared to the Celestial Sky Society, they were like a huge, empty building, fundamentally unstable and prone to collapse at any moment. Sadly, other than Bai Xiaochun's Dao protectors, virtually all of the other Azure Dragon Society cultivators present were all starting to ponder what move to make next. If the leadership was doing that, it almost wasn't necessary to mention the ordinary cultivators who made up the rest of the organization. Bai Xiaochun knew that if he didn't handle this situation well, the entire Azure Dragon Society could collapse. However, now wasn't the moment to ponder the Azure Dragon Society's situation. The glittering jade slip still hovered in front of him, and even as everyone who had just rushed in was still peppering him with questions, his eyes flashed, and he cleared his throat. What are you getting so anxious for? Everyone's mouths snapped shut. Bai Xiaochun was the boss of the Azure Dragon Society, and a gold core cultivator. Even more importantly, he was the inventor of the fantasy pill. Although he didn't have much of a role in the daily operations of the organization, the Azure Dragon Society was his, and he was the most stabilizing force within it. I know the Celestial Sky Society has powerful backers, but did you really think I wouldn't have some too? With that, he rose to his feet, stuck his chin up, and pointed at the jade slip. Look at that, all of you. What is it? Everyone looked over in surprise, and soon people realized that it was an object from the Rainbow District. That's the command medallion of the Peak Lord of Sky Quarter Rainbow. I knew I saw a beam of light flying down from Sky Quarter Rainbow. So, it came here. It was actually a message for our exalted boss. The cultivators of the Azure Dragon Society couldn't help but gasp as they looked over at Bai Xiaochun, eyes shining with bright light. Don't tell me that the boss actually has special connections with Sky Quarter itself? As everyone was reeling in shock, Xu Baosai, Master God Diviner, and Big Fatty Zhang were all staring at Bai Xiaochun with blank looks, completely unable to wrap their minds around how he could possibly be connected to the Sky Quarter Peak Lord. As long as you understand the situation, Bai Xiaochun said coolly. Well, now I'm going to go pay a formal visit to the Sky Quarter Peak Lord. We'll figure out our next step after I get back. With that, he waved his sleeve, grabbing the jade slip and walking out the chamber. As he left, all of the Azure Dragon Society cultivators clasped hands and bowed. Although they were still somewhat worried, they felt much more relieved than they had been moments before. That attitude would have a big influence on the cultivators under their control, and at the very least, would ensure that the restrictions placed on fantasy pills would not cause chaos in the Azure Dragon Society, at least not for the time being. Bai Xiaochun's act had been pulled off perfectly. Even Big Fatty Zhang had been taken in, and watched Bai Xiaochun with both confidence and anticipation. However, as soon as Bai Xiaochun left the Azure Dragon Society's Immortals cave, he almost collapsed into tears. Moments before, he had been standing tall and straight, but now he was racked with anxiety. At the same time, his rage toward the Celestial Sky Society burned hotter than ever. However, there was no time now to dwell on his anger. What does the Sky Quarter Peak Lord want with me? He thought nervously as he headed toward a certain location in the central district of Sky City that led to the Rainbow District. This was where newly promoted yellow-robed disciples would come to head to the rainbow. As for red and orange-robed disciples, they could only enter this area if they had special invitations or orders. Upon reaching the teleportation portal, he produced the jade slip and took a deep breath. Trying to look solemn and tragic, as if he were going for broke, he stepped forward into the portal. Rumbling sounds could be heard, along with the dazzling light of teleportation, which wrapped around him for a moment before fading away, and him along with it. When he reappeared, he was in the third level of rainbows at the bottom of the waterfall, on the second rainbow. As soon as he materialized, he looked around to find himself surrounded by richly ornamented buildings connected by green jade paths. Immortal trees flourished everywhere, and spiritual energy wafted about, making the place seem like the picture of a celestial paradise. There were ponds and immortals' caves, as well as domesticated spirit creatures frolicking within the trees and waters. Soft, seven-colored light permeated the entire area, creating a spectacular scene of beauty. Yellow-robed disciples could be seen everywhere, sitting in meditation or strolling about. Everything was quiet and peaceful, completely lacking the raucous brouhaha common in Sky City. There were flowing crowds of people, and yet all of the cultivators looked cold and indifferent. Each and every one seemed tall and slender, with mysterious light swirling around them that made them seem like something from beyond the mortal world. Apparently, there was some sort of restrictive spell in place that made the strong spiritual energy softer and more gentle, and ensured that one's energy was not drained while absorbing it. Bai Xiaochun was immediately taken aback. This was his first time seeing the world that existed on the rainbow, and he couldn't help but rub his eyes to make sure he wasn't seeing things. Sure enough, it was all there. One interesting thing he noted was that although the Rainbow District was large, it was only about half the size of Sky City. Even as Bai Xiaochun looked around in amazement, the air in front of him distorted, and a female yellow-robed disciple stepped out of thin air. She had long flowing hair and lovely facial features, although her expression was a bit cold. Looking Bai Xiaochun up and down, she said, "You're Bai Xiaochun?" A serious expression took over Bai Xiaochun's eyes. This young woman was at the peak of the early core formation stage, just like him, and yet the method she had used to appear in front of him was quite astonishing. This was his first time encountering someone in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect who was in the same cultivation level as himself, and also his first time seeing firsthand some of the divine abilities and magical techniques that he had only just heard about so far. If her cultivation base had been higher than his, he might have reacted differently. But considering they were in the same level, he decided that he couldn't let himself look weak, so he proudly stated, "Yeah, I'm Bai Xiaochun. Who are you? Come with me. My master wants to see you. By the way, watch your step around here. Core formation cultivators can get killed here very easily if they get lost." With that, she turned and began to walk off. Her words made Bai Xiaochun feel more nervous than ever as he hurried to follow her. The two of them became two beams of bright light that shot off into the distance. As they flew along, Bai Xiaochun looked down at the things passing by below, and quickly came to realize how the sky quarter rainbows were set up. There were 5 ring-shaped districts that seemed to be filled with more coldness and pressure the further they went toward the center. Eventually, the young woman led him to the middle ring, where a shockingly tall mountain peak became visible. It was surrounded by dazzling 7-colored light, and was completely devoid of any type of plants or vegetation. The only thing visible on the peak was an enormous temple, gray in color and surrounded by an indescribable energy. Just by looking at it, Bai Xiaochun got the feeling that it wasn't a temple, but rather, an ancient wild beast. The young woman came to a stop after leading Bai Xiaochun to the foot of the mountain. Then, she stepped back a few paces, maintaining her silence. Even as Bai Xiaochun was wondering what exactly she was doing, an ancient voice suddenly drifted out from the temple at the peak of the mountain. "Admit to your crimes, Bai Xiaochun." In response to the words, Bai Xiaochun's anxiety suddenly faded away, and he sighed inwardly. At the same time, he inwardly thanked the senior cultivators back in the Spirit Stream sect and the Bloodstream sect, who had often scared the living daylights out of him by uttering such words. As soon as the words registered in his mind, he was relatively certain that he wasn't in trouble. Whenever members of the senior generation spoke like that, it was like they were brandishing a club, only to hand out rewards afterward. Having realized this, Bai Xiaochun immediately knew what to do next. Gasping, he plastered an expression onto his face that was a mix of bitterness, defiance, and anger. At the same time, he tried to look like he felt deep respect for the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, and hoped to rise within its ranks, but simultaneously, missed the river-defying sect. As these expressions all played out on his face, it created the perfect complicated look that a hostage should have. As he stood there silently, he clasped hands and bowed deeply, as though he had thousands of words he wished to speak, and yet didn't. Instead, he was simply waiting to see what would happen to him. Although he didn't say anything, his expression spoke volumes. Bai Xiaochun had mastered this tactic of responding to accusations with righteous indignation back in the bloodstream sect, and had always found it to be particularly effective. As for the cold-faced young woman, when she saw the expression on Bai Xiaochun's face, her jaw dropped. The voice which had just spoken out from the mountain maintained silence for a moment before continuing, "Fine, we'll let the matter drop. After all, you're a hostage from the river-defying sect, which is an important sect connected to the Sky Quarter. Give me the formula for the fantasy pill. It has some blemishes, but at the same time, could come in useful." Bai Xiaochun hesitated, causing a protracted moment of silence. Then, the ancient voice once again spoke from within the seven-colored light shining out of the temple. "I won't force you to give it to me for free. I'll pay you 1 million merit points, and immediately promote you to a yellow-robed disciple. Henceforth, you will no longer reside in Sky City." When the young female cultivator heard this, her eyes went wide, and she looked up at the temple in shock. Bai Xiaochun was feeling very pleased with himself, but didn't let that show on his face. Actually, he was feeling a bit of disdain at the moment. After all, he had plenty of merit points, and if he'd wanted to be promoted to the Rainbow District, he could have done it long ago. He often spent tens of thousands of merit points on a single meal, not to mention all of the puppet maid servants he had to wait upon him. Plus, he had lots of subordinates to take care of. In the end, his monthly expenses probably exceeded 1 million merit points. Only a complete moron would come here, he thought. Life is great back in Sky City. I'm super powerful, my cultivation goes really quickly, and nobody causes me any problems. Bai Xiaochun had already decided that he didn't want to be promoted to the Rainbow District, and this trip had proved it. Everyone had cold expressions here, and it didn't look like a fun place at all. Upon hearing the Peak Lord's offer, Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath, clasped hands and bowed deeply, his expression more somber than ever. Sounding profoundly righteous, he spoke out in a loud voice, "Peak Lord, of course disciple is willing to give you the pill formula. As for the merit points, I don't want them. I have no desire to become a yellow-robed disciple in that fashion. That's simply not my style. Bai Xiaochun will become a yellow-robed disciple with the merit points he earns with his own 2 hands." The cold-looking young female cultivator looked at Bai Xiaochun again. Moments ago, her master the Peak Lord's offer had been completely astonishing to her. In all her years as his apprentice, this was her first time hearing him be so generous. But then, her shock only continued to grow as Bai Xiaochun refused the offer. She couldn't help but gasp. Never before had she seen anyone turn down such an opportunity. 1 million merit points was a huge sum to any cultivator. It was the type of savings most people spent an entire 60-year cycle building up. As for the Peak Lord, were it not for the fact that he had already heard about Bai Xiaochun's antics in Sky City, he would also have been shocked. After all, throughout all his years serving as the Peak Lord, he had never seen any disciple turn down the opportunity to become a yellow-robed disciple. Up in the temple, he was sitting there with an odd expression on his face, looking off to the side, where stood the vague image of a white-robed young woman. Melancholy and other mixed emotions could be seen on her face as she looked at Bai Xiaochun. She seemed to exist somewhere between illusory and corporeal, and was difficult to see clearly. However, from the way the air around her distorted and filled with rifts, it was possible to determine that she either had a shocking cultivation base, or possessed some unimaginably powerful precious treasure. When the young woman didn't react to Bai Xiaochun's statement, the Sky Quarter Peak Lord's frustration rose. The truth was that he didn't need the medicine formula at all, nor did he want it. However, someone who he didn't dare to provoke had tasked him with watching out for Bai Xiaochun, and therefore, he had been looking for an opportunity to give him a large sum of merit points. But without a good excuse, how could he stoop to helping a mere core formation cultivator? After all, he was the Sky Quarter Peak Lord, and although he wasn't a diva, he was half a step into that realm, and a hostage definitely wasn't someone he should care about. And yet, here Bai Xiaochun had gone and rejected his offer. The Peak Lord was starting to feel very frustrated. After all, the person he didn't dare to provoke, the one who had made the demands of him to begin with, was standing right next to him. It was none other than that young woman in the white robe. "Cut the crap," he said. "Considering my status, you think I'm just going to take things from you? Tell me what you want, and as long as it's in my power, I'll meet your demands." Bai Xiaochun wasn't the only one to gape in response to the words. The cold-faced female cultivator gasped. As of this day, her view of her master had changed. Clearly, he wasn't trying to trade with Bai Xiaochun, he was simply handing things over to him. What powerful backer does this Bai Xiaochun have, she thought, looking at him with wide eyes, her heart pounding. Shocked, Bai Xiaochun looked up toward the dazzling temple at the peak of the mountain, and suddenly felt a bit nervous. Something about the whole situation seemed odd, as if this peak lord wouldn't let him go without giving him something. In fact, it seemed like refusing the offer would enrage the man. Even as he hesitated, the peak lord once again demanded that he hurry up and accept the offer. Bai Xiaochun grit his teeth. Eyes sparkling, he looked up at the temple and said, "Peak lord, disciple is extremely grateful for your kind intentions. If you truly wish to give me something, senior, well, down in Sky City you have to rent everything. I really can never feel at home. After coming here all alone, sir, I really wish I could have my own piece of land, something that belongs just to me. What do you think? When I find the right location, I'll build myself a little mansion right on top of it." With that, he looked up toward the mountain peak, anticipation written on his face. Although he had been a bit hesitant to make the request, it was to his surprise that he saw a seven-colored beam of light immediately fly out from the temple and come to a stop right in front of him in the form of a little seven-colored flag. The east, south, and central districts are off limits. But go ahead and select any open land in the west or north districts. Plant that flag in the ground, and that 5-kilometer area will be your personal property. With that, the Sky Quarter Peak Lord sighed in relief, then sent a wave of seven-colored light to push Bai Xiaochun and the cold-faced female cultivator away. The female cultivator was completely taken aback, and couldn't stop staring at the seven-colored flag in Bai Xiaochun's hand. Even as the Peak Lord's personal apprentice, she had never received such treatment, and she couldn't prevent her eyes from shining brightly. How could she ever have imagined that her master would give Bai Xiaochun the gift of personal property? In Sky City, a 5-kilometer area of personal property was so expensive that it was impossible to even imagine, and yet her master had handed it over without even pausing. From what the young woman could tell, Bai Xiaochun must have a very powerful backer indeed. He really gave it to me? Bai Xiaochun thought with a gasp, clutching the seven-colored flag in his hand as he was pushed 300 meters away from the mountain. As he looked over his shoulder, he was fairly certain that he could see through the door of the seven-colored temple, where the vague image of a young woman could be seen. It was impossible to tell exactly what she looked like, and even in the moment in which he saw her, she vanished. With that, he turned and left, taking his suspicions with him. A moment later, the young woman who had just vanished materialized again, this time wearing a veil. "Long time no see, Xiaochun," she murmured. A moment later, a passing breeze lifted the veil for just a moment, revealing a spectacularly beautiful face. Had Bai Xiaochun been there to see it, he would have recognized this young woman immediately. She looked very much like Du Lingfei. Slowly, a smile spread out on her face, the type of smile that comes when reuniting with someone important, a smile filled with warmth and anticipation. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.